Is this a sign that sex sells is back? This Week in E-Commerce, episode 101. Welcome back for our 100 plus one episode. I am now Chia, back for another week, taking you through retail headlines along with Alex Ross, who is over in Melbourne today. Alex, how are you?
Well, yes, I'm in Melbourne. Everyone says it's cold. It is comparatively to Adelaide for sure, but it's good to be back. I haven't been in Melbourne for a while.
I hear that it's going to be bucketing down on the East Coast this week. Is it raining over there?
Not yet, and I hope that it holds out. I did not bring any waterproof wear, but we'll see. I'm here till Thursday.
Yeah, well, I got to say, I was in Sydney last week. When am I not in Sydney?
Yeah.
And it was absolutely pouring down for like Wednesday and Thursday. I could not believe how wet it was. And then there was like slight reprieve on Friday, and it starts again this week.
Yeah, it's grim over there in Sydney when it rains. There's just nothing to do.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you stay at home, work, catch up with some Netflix, which I've been doing a lot of. I've been watching a lot of Netflix and documentaries lately.
That's a bit of a change of pace for you, so I love that.
Yeah, look, I've been on a lot of planes and just, having some quieter moments and just going, I just need to relax a little bit because I'm just finding that I'm just working all the time now.
Yeah, 100%.
Although I did go to the Beauty Expo in Sydney on the weekend, and that was really lovely just to go there and see what's happening in the world of beauty. Guess what is the hottest ingredient of the year when it comes to beauty?
I would have said like a few years ago, it was like pink clay from Australia, and then there was green tea from Australia. I'm not sure. You tell me.
Salmon sperm.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I've heard of the salmon sperm facial. Apparently amazing rejuvenation. I've never done it. I know a few people that have. That doesn't surprise me.
This is how juvenile I am. When you said salmon sperm facial, you did not even want to know what I was thinking. All right, we have a lot to cover off this episode, including we're going to be diving into JB Hi-Fi a little bit later, as well as the Pokemon trading card craze. But before we dig into that, a couple of quick stories we're going to run over. First one is ASICs, which used to be like Crocs, like the shoe which your orthopedist would recommend, or your pediatrician would recommend to you, has now shown that they are growing like crazy. In the first half of the year, their sales are up 17%, 17.7% to 2.74 billion for the first half of the year, with net profit hitting 364 million, which is a 13% net profit margin, which for a company their size is just crazy. And they're growing in every category. Alex, are you a fan of ASICs? Like, have you ever owned ASICs in your life?
I think to your point when you opened the story, it's a reliable brand. They've always had great products. In my netball days, they had the Net Burner, which is their actual shoe for netball, which had the gel at the back. So great R&D, great product. I think that it's interesting that we're seeing that performance footwear demand increase. Does that say that we're becoming healthier beings out there, and there is more of a push to get on the streets and run? I don't know.
Well, you look at running, right? Like, and that's probably the category which ASICs are most known for. They've got the number of shoes in there. They've got the Kayanos, which are like probably the biggest selling running shoe. They've got the gel Cumulus. It's showing that people who are into these sports are taking them much more seriously than ever before. They're actually, it's becoming part of their identity. If you look at running, for instance, the City to Surf, which was a couple of weeks ago in Sydney, every fifth person I know did fit City to Surf, and a few weeks before that, it was High Rocks. So we're taking these things much more seriously than before, and along with that, I guess you kind of then start taking your gear much more seriously as well. And by gear, I don't mean steroids. I mean like your footwear and your apparel.
Take that seriously. Well, and you have to, I'm by no means a runner here, so bear with me, but you have to replace the shoe after X amount of wears, right? Otherwise Correct. It's going to have problems on your form. So there's a little bit of kind of retention baked into that model there. I was just looking generally. Apparently the global athletic footwear market is projected to grow around 4%. There's a few different reports here varying from like 3.9 to 4.3 across the CAGR, the compound annual growth rate, for those playing at home. So I think that's an exciting projection for that whole vertical, as well as ASICs leading the front there.
Yeah, and they're not the sexiest shoes, but technically they are definitely one of the best. If there's anything which I know from my days working with running shoe companies, it's that the technicality, they are seen as being definitely the market leader. All right, moving into something a little bit less serious. Funko Pops. Do you own any Funko Pops? The bobbleheads?
No, this is another one that I did have to Google. I mean, I'm familiar with those kind of like vinyl figurines and the bobbleheads, but no, I definitely do not own any of those collectibles.
Okay, I own a lot across many different fandoms. I'm looking at some Supernatural Funkos right there. There's some
Nice.
Marvel ones around. I'm pretty sure there's a Wolverine behind me. I've got a lot of the Funkos.
Okay.
They're just kind of the thing when you're into those fandoms, which you go and buy. Well, that company, which has been on a huge tear over the last 10 or so years, and this is almost counter to the kidulting, which we were talking about before, they've seen their sales drop, where they've seen a 22% drop in their sales, 193 down to $193.5 million, which has led to them actually having to make quite a few cuts in the business as well. So they've laid off 20% of staff, and they're really blaming the tariffs for this. Tariffs for really squeezing their margins, leading to them actually having to restructure their debt.
Yeah, off the back of, like you said, our conversation last week around kidulting and that kidult trend, I was surprised to see this, but looking further into it with what's happening with the tariffs and where they're kind of producing those products, I think it's just the sad reality of those restrictions in market at the moment.
Yeah, and also I think the other interesting thing is that they rely almost exclusively on licensing. They don't produce any of their own IP. It's all licensed IP, which means that they're also giving away quite a big chunk of margin with that as well, which, when you consider that tariffs are squeezing them on one end, they're also being squeezed on the other end with the commissions they have to pay for the licensing. And that makes it really hard to grow that brand when you're always going to be margin constrained, with that, because you don't have anything of your own which you're making full margin on.
Yeah, okay. And somebody that owns Funkos, what do you think about the rise of Labubu and this having kind of any impact on that? Because my mind goes to cute little collectibles, and I'm sorry, I've put them all in one basket. So you're probably a better person to ask.
Look, I think they're complementary. I don't think they're going to cannibalize one, because if you're into that sort of property, you are going to go buy Funkos in that, or for Game of Thrones or Supernatural or anything which you're really into. But there's probably a limit as well in terms of like how many Funkos you can own. Like, I've stopped buying them because I literally at one point had a whole bookcase and every shelf had like a row of Funkos. And my wife was just like, what are you doing with these? And my kids wanted to play with them. They were trying to rip the heads off. And so now most of them just live in a box, and I only have the ones which I really love, which are out there. So I think there's kind of like a limit to how many you can buy as well. But then also, because the other companies are starting to license those same properties as well, you can see the rise of licensing. They're not as unique as they once were. Before, that was the only one of the few things you could actually get which was licensed. Now there's heaps you can get which is licensed.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose you've just got to wait till your next kind of obsession and fandom comes along for you to justify that next purchase and kick one off the shelf back into the box.
Yeah, that's right. All right, and the last quick one we're going to cover off is a recent trend in some advertising, particularly with a beauty brand, where Urban Decay are starting to use OnlyFans talent in their campaigns. Is this a sign that sex sells is back?
Not sure what to think about this. I'm still in two minds on this story. I feel like in the next couple of weeks, I wouldn't be mad about circling back to this one as well, because reading some of the commentary online, there's worries that moves like this could be enticing young girls to the OnlyFans platform. But on the other hand, I'm like, it's a great marketing move. Urban Decay, the brand, they're known for their long-lasting makeup. That's kind of their shtick. It's like go out all night, like 12-hour setting spray. So if you kind of connect the dots there a little bit, and now we're getting promoted by an OnlyFans person, I see what they've done, and it's pretty clever. And this particular influencer, Ari, I don't know how to say her last name, I see her all over TikTok. So she obviously has massive presence, millions and millions of followers. It's controversial, but I can see why they've done it.
Look, and I think OnlyFans is actually starting to become very normalized in society as well, where, I think if you go back a few years, it was always just like, it's very, and look, it is still not safe for work. But it had like a stigma around it. But now it's so common now. And I actually know a lot of people, who I go to the gym with, and who I know just through different social circles, who have OnlyFans accounts. I'm just like, wow, okay. And they just kind of do it for a little bit of fun. They stay within their particular boundaries. So I just think it's just becoming more and more common as well. And it also kind of shows that, through the 2000s, particularly like, 2010s, maybe post-COVID, we started to move towards very safe things. Like everything had to be, very, very almost vanilla, because we were, yeah. But now it's like, okay, well, do you know what? We're at this point in time where we have this president who's just literally saying the first thing off the top of his head. It's like, well, I can potentially, create an OnlyFans account. Like, not me, I will not do that, but other people could.
Well, yeah, and funny enough, OnlyFans, there used to be beauty creators on there before it kind of became clear where the platform was going in that direction, because it is really just about creators being able to monetize their content. Looping that back to the beauty story, I find that's an interesting kind of full circle moment too.
Yeah. All right, let's keep an eye on that one, and maybe we'll come back to it in a couple of weeks' time once we can see if this trend starts to take off and more brands starting to use OnlyFans creators. All right, we're going to get into our big stories for the week. And the big one is JB Hi-Fi. And my God, this stock is on a tear. Hearing that they have reached record highs 10 times in the last 6 months is just absolutely incredible. And in their latest financials, they've reported that their FY25 revenue was up 10% to $10.5 billion. And over this period, they have outperformed the ASX by 54%. That is just mind-boggling. Although, having said that, though, their shares did dip 4% because I think a lot of people decided to sell at the peak. But man, they are just a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, it's great to see the success. They're an incredible business. I think I always draw back to their famously low operating costs and running a really tight ship, even when they're so large. I think they've got something like 330 retail stores across Australia and New Zealand, massive operation. So to be putting up such strong numbers, really impressive. Yeah, it's great to see.
Yeah, and I think something which they've been very good over their history as well at balancing their costs with their revenue as well. Like while they push for growth, and they're definitely getting that, and expansion, they continue to open more and more stores, is that they also manage their costs incredibly well. Like you said, the stores are great. They're incredibly lean. Like it's just a blank space with a whole bunch of racking. Yeah, that's about it. And very young staff who, or potentially old staff who are just really, really into whatever it is they're into. I've got one of my best mates, Manny, has worked at JB Hi-Fi for about 15 years. He's in his 50s now, and he's so knowledgeable about music, and he just loves it. He will never leave there. They will cart him out of there because he just loves what it's all about, to talk about music, to introduce people to new music, and that's his high. Right. So I think they've done that really well, where you know exactly what you're going to get from JB Hi-Fi. And as we talked about before, in terms of their category as well, we talked about one of the growth categories is around consumer electronics, TVs, like those larger, more expensive things, because people are spending more time at home. The number one seller over the last 12 months, the Nintendo Switch 2, which broke all sorts of records, and they sold a big chunk of them in Australia.
Yeah, it's one of those questions of how do we even begin to compete with JB Hi-Fi at this point? I don't know how you enter into that. One of my thoughts was around specialty, but to your point, they've got such great staff that they've got, and diverse staff as well, where they do have the Sound Expo. And then I've gone and bought, coffee machines from there, and they still had really, really great advice to me. So yeah, it's really impressive.
Yeah, and it's something which I think they're hard to compete with as well, because they're local. And when you have those products, they've got it cheaper than anyone else more often than not. But you can also buy it locally and get it like within an hour too. Whereas if you were going to import it from like a Temu, for instance, it's going to take you a couple of weeks to get it, or anywhere else for that matter. And they've got stores everywhere, and you can do the click and collect. You can get it delivered within an hour with Uber. It's just such a convenient model, and they have probably more or less everything. And again, like I said before, they're so insulated from what happens in the rest of the market, because even when times are tough, people will actually invest more in what they sell. A friend of mine bought a coffee machine from there, probably like you, from JB Hi-Fi, because he was like, I'm paying like $6 for a coffee every morning. Actually, the coffee's now $8. He's like, and you know what? I'm just going to buy a good coffee machine and just make it at home before I leave. And he loves it.
Yeah. And potentially like the product that they stock has that urgency where you do go to store to pick up and just get it. Like you're not waiting around for the Nintendo Switch to be posted to you. You've got the weekend free. Okay, cool. Let's go get that TV and install it. So I think impressive share from an omni-channel perspective, but they're still really driving that revenue through stores.
Now, interesting thing as well is that their CEO also announced, along with the earnings report, that he has going to be stepping down. So Terry Smart will be stepping down, and the new CEO, who is Nick Wells, who was the COO, is stepping into the job. What do you think about that sort of move? Do you think that that this could potentially cause some disruption with the JB Hi-Fi business?
I mean, naturally there will be some disruption, but taking the COO and moving to that CEO role, I think is a good way of minimizing as much as disruption as possible, right? Obviously, we've got someone who knows the business that would have worked really closely with Terry. So out of all of the transitions, hopefully it's as smooth as possible. And I'm sure Terry Smart got a great payday up the back of those great results.
Yeah, delivering those results for the last 5 years, and before that, he was at the company for another 5 years, I believe. So he's definitely earned it, I think, with how that's gone.
It's a bit of a mic drop moment for him.
Definitely a mic drop moment. All right, our second big topic is not really retail related, but kind of retail related, in that Epic Games, who have been embroiled in a long-term court case against Apple and Google for anti-competitive behavior, have actually won now. And what this was, for those who weren't aware of it, is that Epic Games, who make Fortnite along with other games, have been forced, essentially, that if the games are purchased, if any of the add-ons are purchased through Apple or the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, they essentially give 30% or potentially 10% to Apple and Google. And that's kind of the tax for being on those platforms, as with any app. So any app which is selling anything like a subscription or any products through there, you have to pay 30% to Apple or Google for that privilege, which essentially has become a tax. They've argued for a long time that it's anti-competitive and that it's essentially monopolistic behavior on their particular platforms. And the federal court has actually agreed with them on that, and they're now set to change that. Well, but I don't believe there'll be any hidden taxes now once the ruling comes through on this.
Yeah, it's a great ruling. At the end of the day, if you can't be on the App Store, then you don't have that accessibility. So yeah, we need to be able to open that up. I did see the news, I think it was this morning or yesterday afternoon, on the ACCC or ACC rather, also going after Google for anti-competitive behaviour with Telstra and Optus. So it seems like overall there's a bit of a crackdown on this, and we're not letting them get away with it anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's something where, one of my big bugbears on Amazon has been that if you have the Amazon app, I can't purchase a book on my Kindle, through the Amazon app, because they don't want you to be able to have that, they don't want to pay that 30%. So I then have to go to the book, go to my browser, then purchase from the browser, which if you're on your phone is kind of annoying. I just want to do it for the app. But now hopefully you'll be able to do that. And there's a potential that this will actually start to unlock more opportunities for retailers to be able to sell via their own apps. I know that currently, there's things like TapCard, which allow you to do that, but are there other things which we're missing out on? I'm not entirely sure about, like TapCard has kind of been the default now, the dominant player when it comes to Shopify mobile apps. But I don't know whether there's additional things which people could be looking at now to potentially go direct to sell on mobile rather than having to go through TapCard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the big players do it, right? Like the Iconics got their own app. Mm-hmm. Mecca, I believe, as you'd expect. But yeah, how can you get beyond TapCard and start to think about that kind of real D2C moment on the App Store?
Yep. All right. And our final story today is going to be about Pokemon trading cards. In particular, a great story which I read in the AFR, because, flying Qantas, you get access to the AFR for free, is that an Australian company I've never heard of called Banter Toys and their founder, Gary Isaacs, have built a $200 million empire distributing Pokemon cards in Australia. It's a fascinating story because they actually made a handshake deal in 2007 to distribute the cards in Australia after Nintendo decided not to continue that distribution in Australia. They took it up, and now they're selling $200 million worth of Pokemon cards across the likes of Kmart, Big W, all those big stores, supplying them with Pokemon cards. That's just what incredible foresight to have thought about that.
I don't know. It's hard. Incredible foresight with a lot of luck as well here, and not to take away what they've built here, but it's a bit like 2020 hindsight's 2020. Now that we know that there is that kind of nostalgia, that kid cult culture, and there's been some updates, I believe, with a new video game coming out from Pokemon. What's it called? Like the Clash of the Pokemon Legends. I'm not sure if you're aware of that one. That's coming out 16th of October 2025. So it's just more relevancy pieces that are coming out for them that are helping. I can't help but think about Nintendo's probably kicking themselves pretty hard under the table right now.
Well, similarly to how ABC decided to give up the licensing rights for Bluey to BBC. That I got to think is probably one of the biggest own goals, because they just said, hang on, we'll just look after the distribution in Australia. You guys can handle everything else. And now Bluey is the number one licensing property globally. Yeah, so I think it's kind of the same way that you don't really know how it's going to go, but at the same time, you almost need to back yourself in certain areas. And it looks like, Banter Toys did that. They saw the opportunity with Pokemon, and it was obviously a great deal, and just took it on. And now it's just huge how much it's grown. I was talking about this with my team the other day about Pokemon trading cards, and like people know teenagers who are now doing the trading card thing. And I did the trading card thing with NBA cards when I was in my early teens, 30 years ago. And now my son's doing it now with AFL cards.
It's really interesting. And they really bring that, Woolworths always give away kind of collectible cards. That culture really exists in children. So they're really kind of bringing that through. So when that gets to that older generation, you're really primed for things like this. Part of me goes to when it's particularly like Gen Z, millennial men, what part of this is monetary motivation, where it's kind of like getting involved in stocks, right? Or with crypto to a degree. So yes, it's fun. Yes, it's about Pokemon and gaming, but there is that more mature element to it when you're actually thinking about those games.
Well, I think you're right. It's like similar to, like you said before, with trading, like stock trading, that where you had an app like Robinhood, for instance, which allowed you to be able to do that. It's that short-term dopamine hit and that anticipation about what if, which we really actually buy those things for. Similar to like Labubus, opening the box and being not sure about which one you're getting. We're kind of tapping into this whole nostalgia and scarcity, about the fact that, hey, we're going to pull like this 1 of 10 Pikachu card, and which is going to be worth $10,000. We just don't know.
Yeah. One of the most interesting things I read through in that article was that Pokemon is the number one top search in eBay, still trending above to this day. Labubu, I think it was iPhone and Louis Vuitton or something like that. So the demand is clearly there.
Yeah, so let's see whether this continues. Look, I think Pokemon has shown how enduring it's going to be. It's been around for like 30 odd years now. Doesn't currently show any signs of slowing down. I know a couple of brands doing Pokemon collaborations, including Black Milk, who launched their recent one a couple of weeks ago. That I think we might be talking about Pokemon again in a couple of years' time. The 200th episode.
Yeah. Let's put that in the glass ball. I think we will be. I think that there's always going to be ways for this to become relevant with different activations.
All right. Well, the takeaway from this episode has been that don't be Funko, but instead be JB Hi-Fi, ASICs, or Banter Toys. That's a lot to cover off, and that's all we have time for this week. Alex, enjoy the rest of your time in Melbourne, and we'll see you back in Adelaide soon. Although we'll probably be like ships of the night. I'll be heading to Sydney where you're coming back to Adelaide.
We'll catch up one day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. You have a great week. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks.